Hey, Yarn Bestie. It's me, Jaya from Hobbii. Welcome back to Skein and Tell, the podcast that unravels it all. And today we are unraveling one of the most important topics for us fiber artists, yarn weights. So let's decipher once and for all the mystery of picking the perfect yarn for the perfect project and how to substitute yarns. Okay, so yarn weight is just a fancy way of saying how thick or thin your yarn is. But we have to note that yarn weight is also the reason why our projects need a certain gauge or have a specific drape or warmth or durability. I mean, think of it like this. Would you make a delicate lace shawl with super chunky yarn? Or would you make a winter blanket with thread-thin lace yarn? Exactly. So yarn weight is actually the foundation of every project. So let's break down the most common yarn weights, where they really shine, and why choosing the right one can make or break your masterpieces. But before we get into dissecting the yarn weight, I think it's quite important to talk about the most mysterious question of all. How do we substitute yarn weights? So when you don't have the exact yarn weight that a pattern calls for, there's always a few little ways you can go about when substituting it. And here's pretty much the options that we are going to cover right now. We're going to cover yards per gram, wraps per inch, holding two strands together, and adjusting your gauge. So let's get nerdy! First and foremost, the easiest way to substitute yarn is by comparing the yardage per gram of, obviously, your original yarn and the substitute yarn. This tells you how thick or thin the yarn is compared to your pattern's recommended yarn. So if you have, for instance, a worsted yarn weight and you have a DK yarn weight, you have to look at how many yards each of these yarns have and comparing it by grams. So if your worsted yarn weight has 200 yards per 100 grams, but your DK yarn weight has 250 yards per 100 grams, this means that your DK yarn has obviously more yards per gram. And this means that it's actually thinner, which means that you won't have the same fabric density. So what you need to do is maybe test out by trying to make a little swatch with two strands together, and eventually keep adjusting and adjusting using different needles, different hook sizes, until you get the necessary amount of stitches that your pattern requires. But what if you have some yarn that doesn't have labels? That is annoying, but it happens. So if you don't have the yardage info, then you can actually use a method called wraps per inch. The way it works is that you wrap your yarn around a ruler or something you have at hand that has a consistent circumference. It can also be a pencil. And you wrap the yarn, making sure it's snug and that the wraps should lay side by side without overlapping. And don't pull the yarn too tightly when you do that because you don't want to fiddle with the actual measurements. Worst case scenario, if you're unsure of your tension, if you think you're wrapping them too tightly or too loosely, try to practice first with a yarn that you have the label for. So a yarn that you know the weight of first. So once you've done your wrapping, you start counting how many wraps fit in one little inch. And then just simply find a wraps per inch chart online. I will make sure that our team adds a little chart to our blog post and then just compare. For instance, if you end up having 10 wraps per inch, that means that that's a worsted yarn weight. Or if the pattern calls for a DK yarn weight, that's usually 11 wraps per inch. So what you can do is, if your pattern says you need a DK yarn weight, but you end up measuring 9 wraps per inch, that means that your yarn is obviously thicker. So you might actually need to use maybe a bigger hook needle or adjusting the stitch count or a smaller hook needle. Wait, now I'm confusing myself. If the yarn is thicker, then you need to use a smaller needle or hook. I got it in the end. Now, a third method is something as simple as actually holding two strands together to approximate a thicker yarn weight, for instance, right? Usually there is this kind of a unspoken rule, kind of a it's a cheating way of substituting yarn. Okay, so we know that approximately there are some yarn combination that give a certain thickness. So for instance, if you combine two strands of lace yarn, that should give you a fingering yarn weight. If you combine two fingering yarn strands, that should give you a DK weight. If you have two DK strands, that should give you a worsted. If you have two worsted, it should give you a bulky. And if you have two bulky, it should give you a super bulky. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you are using this method by holding two strands together, also known as double stranding, that doesn't mean that you actually need double amount of yardage to get to the original yarn that you are trying to substitute. I know that it's a little crazy, and I can give you the math and get you very bored with all the nerdery behind it. But just as an idea and as an example, if a pattern calls for maybe 200 yards of worsted yarn weight, to get a worsted, you could actually use two strands of DK weight, right? But you will actually only end up using about 270 yards of DK in total to make the same amount of thickness. So it's kind of funny. That's why actually the next method, I believe, is probably the most used, the most must do of all, which is obviously adjusting your gauge over and over and over. And we already know that, yes, swatching is key. So even if you substitute the weight correctly, different fibers and different brands, they behave differently. This means that when you knit or crochet a 4x4 inch swatch, that's a 10 by 10 centimeter swatch, using your substitute yarn, you have to count the number of stitches per inch or centimeters, 10 centimeters, and you have to compare it to the pattern's required gauge. Now, if your stitches are too big, go down a needle or a hook size, and if your stitches are too small, go up a needle or hook size. You can go up a hook size and knit it as much as you want. Well, technically. So the conclusion is that you have a lot of different methods on how you can substitute the yarn like a pro. Substitute a yarn like a pro. You can compare your yards per gram or to find a similar weight. You can use the wraps per inch if no label is available. You can also hold two strands together or double stranding if you need a thicker yarn. And you can always swatch to check your gauge before actually starting on a project. And remember, you can always go up and down needle hook size to adjust stitches if necessary. So yeah, that was So let's actually get into learning about common yarn weights and what they're good for. So yeah, see you in a bit. We interrupt this episode for a special segment that explores the history of yarn. The Archaeology of Yarn, brought to you by our special correspondent, Yarndiana Jones. I still love this accent. I still want to get good at it. At some point, I will. But today we're going to skip all of that, and we're going to talk about a yarn that's been in almost every crafter's store, in almost every crafter's beloved budget-conscious stash, and, possibly lurking pretty much everywhere around you. Can you guess which one it is? That's right, it's plastic fantastic acrylic yarn. Now, this is the synthetic superstar, the machine washable wonder of the world. The fiber that makes purists clutch their merino wool in horror. But where did acrylic yarn come from? How did it go from being a top secret military invention to the shelves of every craft store in existence? Ba, 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 ba. I imagine this like little bossa nova song. All right, so grab your needles and let's stitch together the story. Let's set the scene. It's 1930. The world is obsessed with science. We're inventing cars that can go faster, planes that fly higher, and fabrics that make our skin not itch. Yes, fabrics made out of chemicals. It's the golden age of synthetic materials, and scientists are cooking up new fibers like they're on an episode of Breaking Bad Textile Edition. Enter acrylic, a fiber made from something called polyacrylonitrile. I tried. Which, let's be honest, sounds like something you probably shouldn't eat. But while it may not be snackable, it turns out that this new material had some super, super serious cool properties, okay? It was lightweight, it was soft, it was warm, and best of all, it was cheap. We love cheap. Scientists at DuPont, the same folks who gave us the nylon and the polyester, took one look at it and said, this could replace wool. And so after some tweaking, by the 1940s, acrylic fiber was ready to make its debut. But there was just one problem. Bum, bum, bum. Wool had been kind of cozy for thousands of years. And let's just say it was not ready to hand over the throne. Now imagine a dramatic movie trailer. I would love that. I can't do this, but I'm going to try. In a world where wool rumbled supreme, a new fiber emerged to challenge the status quo. That's right. When acrylic hit the market in the 50s, it went head-to-head with wool. There were ads that were absolutely wild. Acrylic was marketed as the ultimate wool alternative. You know, it was like stuff like, just as warm as wool without the itch. Boom! Machine washable. No more shrink disasters. Boom! Oh, I just love it. Moths can't eat it. Boom! It's like they really went for it, you know? And let me tell you, that last one was actually a quite big deal because moths had been feasting on wool sweaters for, centuries, turning closets into all-you-can-eat buffets. But, you know, acrylic, moths took one bite and they're like, nope. Mm-mm. Just like we said, it's not snackable. For people who also just kind of tired of hand washing delicate wool sweaters and dealing with expensive dry cleaning bills, acrylic yarn seemed like a dream come true. But by the 60s, it was everywhere. What about the wool lovers, though? Well, they were not so happy. There was judgment. There were fiber snobs. There were side eyes at every single craft fair. It was like the Pepsi versus Coke in the yarn world, pretty much. You know, but with more needles and hooks involved, I would suppose. But in the 70s and the 80s as well, acrylic had a full takeover in the craft store shelves. Granny squares, acrylic. Baby blankets, acrylic. Itchy sweater you got for Christmas? Definitely not acrylic. And the biggest reason, it was cheap, man. It was so cheap, honey. I mean, wool was expensive, right? Silk was a luxury. Not everybody who could afford high-end cashmere sweaters and yarns and so forth. So acrylic was affordable, it was accessible, it came in a million colors. Neon green, check. Sparkly purple, check. Weird mustard yellow that somehow just keeps coming back in style, and I love it. Absolutely, check. And because it was made in a lab, manufacturers could actually make improvements. So they could make it softer, they could make it not pill. And you know, over time, even the biggest yarn snobs started admitting, okay, including myself, by the way. Some acrylic yarns are actually pretty nice. And that's right, That's right, bestie. I mean, the great acrylic redemption arc had begun. And today, acrylic is still one of the most popular yarns in the world. But it's also kind of controversial. Because on one hand, it's super affordable. It's easy to take care of it. It's perfect for beginners. And on the other hand, it is plastic. And that matters because it's not biodegradable in nature like natural fibers are. But in an era of sustainability and eco-conscious crafting, that is a problem. So don't start frogging your acrylic projects just yet. Companies are finally trying to develop recycled acrylic yarns and also blends that use less plastic to make them a bit more suitable for more sustainable reasons. And plus, as technology improves, synthetic fibers are also becoming softer, more breathable, and more environmentally friendly. So, could acrylic yarn be on the verge of its second redemption arc? I mean, only time can tell. So yeah, let's recap. Acrylic yarn, born in a science lab, took over the fiber industry, caused a minor knitting war with wool purists, and is now trying to reinvent itself for the modern crafter. Love it or hate it, but you have to admit that this yarn has had a wild journey. So next time you're browsing on the website on Hobbii.com and you're staring at those rainbow-colored skeins of acrylic, just remember you're looking at a fiber that has survived decades of controversy, fashion trends, and a lot of judgmental crafters. Just throwing judgmental crafter lingo at it. And yet, it's still here, it's still colorful, it's still affordable, and it's still making some cozy blankets. Now, if that's not resilience, baby, I don't know what it is. All right, now that we basically know of the methods that we can actually use to substitute our yarn, let's actually have a walk through common yarn weights so that we can actually understand them and substitute them to our pleasing. Let's quickly go over the main yarn weights. We have lace, we have fingering, we have sport, DK, worsted, and bulky. We're going to start off with, obviously, lace weight, which is a 0. The two main categories in here is cobweb and thread. Keep in mind that each single yarn weight has two categories, one that is very, very thin and one that is slightly thicker. So lace weight is the thinnest of yarn weights. It's super fine, it's delicate, it's perfect for light and airy projects like maybe lace shawls or wraps or even intricate lace work for garments, like those fine lace details that we sometimes see on the cuffs of tops or so forth. So it is technically a yarn that you could maybe double up and get a thicker yarn thread, especially if you're using something like kid silk. And yeah, it's very, very light. It's you need tiny little needles and hooks to work with it. But and a little bit of patience. All right, next up we have fingering weight. That's a size 1 with two main categories. We have sock and baby. Now, if you love making socks or lightweight garments, then obviously fingering weight is your jam. It's the go-to for intricate sock patterns, for baby clothing, for projects that require just the right amount of softness and also breathability. And here's a fun fact. To give socks extra durability, fingering yarn often needs to have a very, very high twist. This helps stand the wear and tear without pilling. And if you want to learn about this, we actually covered it up in an episode previously that we did with Kat from Product and Procurement here at Hobbii. We covered up what it means to have a high twist and a low twist when we spin yarn. So check that out. I think it's episode 3, maybe? I think so. It's a long episode, but it's a lot of fun. You get a lot of insight from Kat because she knows so much. Shout out to Kat. All right, so lace, fingering, then we have sport weight. That's a size 2. That is for fine and baby categories. So sport weight sits very, very nicely in the middle between fingering and decade, which means that it's actually quite perfect for maybe light sweaters, accessories that need a little bit more substance but still have that lightness to them. So I would probably also make a lot of shawls out of this, something that needs to have a nice drape and a lot of baby wear. Because let's face it, it's nice for babies to feel like they are wearing something that is not thick, something that is thin and drapey. So sport yarn weight can actually be used for athletic wear as well, like knitted workout tops. And I think that's kind of cool. Perfect, for something both stylish and also functional. Now, next up, we have DK weight, a size 3. This is a light or also known as a double weight category. DK weight is, I would probably think, a crowd favorite because it strikes the perfect balance between drapey and durable. It's very, very, very popular for garments like cardigans, scarves, sweaters, everything that works up quickly without it being very, very bulky, if that makes any sense. So you can, like I said, we can make sweaters, scarves, shawls, wraps, you name it. And actually, a fun fact is that the name double knit, which is also, the DK is also known for double knit, that's what it stands for, DK double knit, comes from the technique used in some knitting styles to create a reversible fabric, meaning that you can actually wear your garments inside out without it looking any less amazing, basically. So that's funny because this yarn weight is so, it's just like the perfect balance, It's the perfect balance to a point where you can actually make those kind of garments that actually use a reversible fabric. So a double fabric without it feeling like it's thick and uncomfortable. Now, the next yarn weight we're going to talk about. Number 4 here, we have worsted yarn weight, which is part of worsted yarn weight. We have several categories. We have medium yarn weight, which is also known as Afghan, also known as Aran, depending on the exact number of stitches each of these categories give you. But worsted weight is probably the most popular yarn weight of all time. Whether you're a beginner, whether you're a super pro, worsted weight is the go-to for so many projects. From, you can go from scarves, right, and hats and baby blankets and winter gloves and warm winter sweaters, a big blanket or a throw for your couch. It's everything. It's everything. And not to mention also the fact that it's beginner's favorite yarn thickness of all time. It also hits the sweet spot there. And actually the term worsted comes from a village in Worsted, England, where this particular yarn was traditionally produced. All right, next up we have the bulky weight. Number 5, chunky, craft, rug. These are the categories that are part of the bulky weight. Now, bulky weight is all about getting cozy and fast. This yarn is thick. It's substantial. It's perfect for when you need that kick of, I'm done. I finished so quickly. This project is done. Check. So if you need that quick result, maybe a chunky winter accessory or a big blanket, then this is the yarn to go for. Obviously, bulky weight is really, really good for winter wear because it has the thickness to keep you warm. So it's perfect for hats and mittens and, like I said, blankets. It's super nice for home decor as well. Maybe you're making a pillow cover, or you're making a little rug, or making a little kitty basket or a doggy basket for your pet or somebody's little hamster. Or also it's really, really nice for for statement pieces, like maybe an oversized jumper. They're so popular right now, the oversized sweaters, and I'm a big fan of that. So that is basically our bulky weight. Last up, we have our last category, which is super bulky. That's a number 6. And inside this yarn weight, we have 2 categories. We have roving and we have jumbo. And now, the thickest of the thick, the super bulky yarn is all about making very, very, very bold statements. It's about working up projects in no time. You can think oversized blankets. Again, you can make giant scarves that are so big and bold that everybody's going to be like, wow, she is or he is super cozy, or they are super cozy. Now, this is best for, like I said, extremely quick projects. This is one of those yarns where you cast on, and by the time you finish casting on, you're also done with the project. So big dramatic statement pieces. A fun fact, actually, and this is a personal one. I used to be a very, very, very big fan of super bulky yarn weights, but I did notice that every time I work with super, super chunky yarn like that, my elbows and my shoulders really, really hurt. I don't know, does it happen to you? Because if it happens to you, and I know that I'm not the only one, then maybe it's an excuse for me to keep going. But I mean, don't get me wrong, I just don't get the appeal right at this moment. I think that I occasionally, maybe every 2 months, cast on or chain on with super bulky yarn weights. And I love it because I know that I'm going to be done with a sweater in 3 days. I know it for sure. Or actually, if it's a smaller project, in a matter of hours. But the funny thing is that I tend to go actually to extremes. So as soon as I am done with a very, very chunky yarn, I go straight to fingering weight or straight to sport weight. I'm 2.5 millimeter needles. That's US size 1.5, by the way. Let's go. Give me, thin and small, and it's quite funny. And it's the same as soon as I'm done with a yarn, with a project that has a yarn weight that is very, very, very thin and small, then I'm ready to go full blown chunky again. And of course, in between, I do have the in-between weights as well. I have my little DK and I have my little worsted projects at all times. So that was pretty much, we've covered right now the categories. And up next, we have why yarn weight actually matters. Let's get into it. It's Weird Yarn Monday. And today we're exploring a yarn that makes your stash wish they could book their next vacation on a tropical island too. Here is pineapple fiber yarn. No, it doesn't smell like pina colada, but yes, it's made from pineapple leaves. Because apparently, every single part of the pineapple is useful, except the part that we actually eat. So pineapple fiber, also called piña fiber, has been used for centuries in the Philippines, where it's considered quite prestigious. Traditional Filipino garments, called barong talong, often incorporate piña fabric, especially for formal occasions like weddings. Now, the extraction and processing of this fiber is a traditional craft that has been passed down through generations, and the process itself is very, very labor intensive. So the way it works is that for harvesting, after the pineapple fruit is harvested, the long sword-like leaves, which would otherwise be agricultural waste, are obviously collected. The leaves undergo a process called decortication, which is the first time I've ever heard that word. So decortication, that's where the fibrous material is separated from the leaf pulp. And it can be done manually by scraping the leaves or through some sort of mechanical methods. I don't know. But the extracted fibers are washed or they're washed to remove the residual leaves, and then they're dried in the sun. These individual fibers are carefully knotted together by hand to create a continuous strand, and the strands are then spun into fiber either by hand or by spinning equipment. The texture of the yarn is similar to linen, but has actually a bit more drape and a more silky-like quality. And it's actually surprisingly strong and durable despite its fine appearance. It is absolutely excellent for warm weather garments, has a super beautiful natural sheen that becomes very, very pronounced if you actually blend this fiber with silk. And it can actually take natural dyes and synthetic dyes extremely well. So yeah. Oh, and also, of course, it utilizes agricultural waste, and therefore that's also like really nice on the sustainable side. Now, I have yet to touch a skein of this yarn, but since, it's silky, it's drapey, I would imagine it would be amazing for lightweight, drapey projects like shawls, maybe summer tops, accessories. And since it has less elasticity than wool, it's better for projects that don't require stretch but need an excellent stitch definition. So yeah, pineapple yarn. You know what? If we actually maybe mix it with milk yarn, with banana yarn, with some coconut yarn, maybe we can make like a smoothie yarn. So yeah, like I said, next up, crab, shrimp yarn. Just joking. Or am I? Okay, so the weight of your yarn doesn't just affect the texture. It plays a major role in how your project will look or feel, because the yarn weight will first of all impact your gauge, which is the stitches per inch. So that means that thicker yarn will have fewer stitches per inch. So this actually is going to affect how tight or loose your fabric will be. It's going to affect your drape, because lightweight yarns have much, much more drape and flow, making them better suited for airy summer tops maybe, or shawls, whilst heavier yarns hold a lot of structure. So they're ideal for items like perhaps a winter sweater or a blanket. They're going to also affect the warmth, because we know that obviously bulky yarns provide more insulation for cozy winter projects, while fingering yard weights are perfect for the warmer weather garments, maybe like a little summer tee. And last but not least, and also quite important, the durability. So heavier yarns tend to be obviously more durable than the thinner yarns. And I mean, that kind of makes sense, right? Because think about the wear on the socks, right? The finer yarn creates a thinner fabric, and therefore it's prone to be worn out faster. So actually, that is why sock yarn is usually made out of the majority wool, and then you have about 25 to 30% of nylon or polyamide, because you do want the yarn to last long. So if you also want the yarn to be on the thinner side, then it's a very, very, very good idea that you buy a yarn that has a synthetic fabric added to a natural fabric. So yeah, that is basically how yarn weight actually matters, and how it plays a super, super big role in how your project will end up looking and feeling in the end. So how do you choose the right yarn weight? Now, if you're wondering how to pick the right yarn for your project, it all comes down to your desired gauge, the type of garment or accessories you're working on, and the kind of look and feel that you actually want. So for garments, lace or fingering is absolutely perfect for light projects, while DK or worsted is a great middle ground for warm and structured pieces. And of course, bulky or super bulky, ideal for quick knit, cozy winter wear. For accessories, we have maybe socks. This usually calls for fingering or sport weight with a yarn that has a high twist, a tight twist for durability. While hats and scarves look absolutely great in worsted or bulky yarn. And then, of course, for home decor, we have worsted through super bulky. All of this works very, very well for blankets, for throws, for pillows, bags, and pretty much anything you want to snuggle up with or you want to spice up an outfit. So there you have it, bestie. From lace weight to super bulky, each yarn weight serves a very, very special purpose in the fiber world. Now, understanding these weights will help you definitely choose the right yarn for your projects, making sure that your creations will turn out just the way you envisioned. Now, all of the info from today's episode is probably going to be added in a blog post, so I'm going to link it down in the description of the podcast. And yeah, whether you're working on, I don't know, a delicate, beautiful lace shawl or maybe a chunky winter blanket, now you know how yarn weights work. Now go forth, my sweet bestie, and stitch with confidence, because now you can substitute any yarn in your stash. All right, I will talk to you very, very soon. Until then, be good to yourself. Okay, love you, bestie. Bye.